World Geography, Basics of Geography, Economics. Here are the learning objectives. Number 1, how would you define economics? Number 2, how would you summarize the 4 economic systems? Number 3, what evidence supports that the free enterprise system is superior to communism? Number 4, how would you categorize the 4 types of economic activities? Number 5, identify the types of resources. Number 6, how is economic development measured? Number 7, what factors determine the location of economic activities? This is a difficult topic, so you'll have to follow along closely throughout the video. What is economics? Economics is the production, the distribution, and the consumption of goods and services. It turns out that everything that's produced, take for example an iPhone, it has to be produced in a factory, manufactured. And then you have to figure out how to get it from the factory into the hands of customers. And that's distribution. And then after that, once someone purchases the product, and they talk on the phone or they use it to surf the internet, that's referred to as the consumption of the good. The same applies to a service. If you study economics as a profession, they call you an economist. Problem of scarcity. The basic problem of economics is this problem of scarcity. Basically, something is scarce when we just don't have enough of it. All resources in the world are finite, and so we always face this problem of not having enough of something. Scarcity involves these 2 basic ideas then. Number 1 is that people have unlimited wants. You want as much as you can get. And second, society can only produce a limited number of things at one time. Goods and services. Goods are things that people make, things that they manufacture, or the crop that they grow in the field. Stores will sell these goods to consumers. Services, on the other hand, are things that people do for other people. People that provide services include electricians, teachers, doctors, auto mechanics. Economic systems and production. 3 economic questions. Scarcity and unlimited wants, which we've already discussed, forces every society to answer 3 fundamental economic questions. The first one is, what should be produced? Second is, how should it be produced? And third is, who should get it? The way a society answers these 3 questions is its economic system. This leads us to the fact that there are 4 economic systems. They are, number 1, traditional, number 2, free enterprise or market capitalism, number 3, communist or command economy, or number 4, socialist or mixed. Let's talk about these 4 economic systems one at a time. First, we're going to consider the traditional economy. Traditional economies. In a traditional economy, the 3 basic economic questions, they're answered according to tradition. People do things because they've always done things that way. These kinds of economies are usually agricultural, and your occupation is determined at birth, and it's usually the same as your parents. Innovation is discouraged. People don't like change. So any kind of innovation or change proceeds slowly. Subsistence agriculture. In these traditional economies, most people engage in what's called subsistence agriculture. And this is where the land will produce just enough food to feed the farmer and his family. There's no surplus, no extra food, so almost nothing is sold or traded. Occasionally, a family or a tribe, they may need something outside of the community. They need a certain good or a service, and they'll usually trade things without exchanging money. This is called the barter system. If you're a farmer, sometimes you have some free time in the winter, and so you might spend your time canning food or weaving cloth, making furniture, making items kind of by hand, and then you can exchange these using the barter system. This making things at home by hand, these are called cottage industries. All right, let's move on to the second economic system. This is the free enterprise system, also called market capitalism. In the free enterprise system, people own their own goods and private property. You own your own home, you own your own small business or large factory. Individuals own these things. Remember, governments are limited, and individuals have more rights. People invest money into the different methods of production. They may invest in a factory or machinery to produce goods, or they may buy land as an investment. This is the way they make money or profit. You can also make profit through logistics, which is the delivery of products. It's like UPS or Federal Express. And there's a lot of money to be made in producing a product at point A and delivering it to point B. And the profit is what remains after you pay the cost of running your business. So you have to pay your employees and your electricity bill and things like that. Supply and demand. In a free enterprise system, the three economic questions, they're answered by the interaction between consumers and producers, buyers and sellers. And the prices are determined by this interaction of supply of goods and the demand for those goods. And this will also determine how resources that are used to produce those goods, how they're allocated. If the supply is high, like after Christmas, and the demand is low, then a store might have a sale. The price may go down. If the new iPhone, 6S comes out and everybody wants one, but there's not very many available for sale, there's a shortage, then the price will go up. Agriculture and industries. Free enterprise economies have commercial agriculture, commercial manufacturing industries, and service industries. In commercial agriculture, crop production is intended for distribution to wholesalers and retailers. So people don't just grow crops for themselves or their immediate family. They grow crops to sell to wholesalers and to sell at the supermarket. Second, in commercial manufacturing plants, goods are produced in these large factories using automation and robotics, and they sell these at stores around town. People that work in service industries, they use their knowledge, their skills, and their experience, and they provide a service to other people. And this is the way they earn their living. You can pause here if you like and look at this chart of the main features of the free enterprise system. Let's look at the third type of economic system, and that's communism. Sometimes communism is also referred to as a command economy or centrally planned economy. Karl Marx. Communism was a theory or a philosophy that was developed in the 1800s in the mind and the writings of Karl Marx. What Marx believed was that business owners, called capitalists, that they did not really contribute much to the process of production, but they gained the largest profit. They were rich, but they didn't really work that hard. And they could get even richer if they paid even lower wages to the workers, exploited them. And so, in that way, the business owner could pocket even more profits. Marx predicted that ultimately, the conditions of workers would grow so dismal that they would rise up and they would overthrow capitalism. Under communism, theoretically, everyone would be equal and cooperation would replace the competition of the free enterprise system. Overview. In the real world, though, this didn't quite work out the way that Karl Marx intended, and communism became an economic system where the economic decisions were not made by the market or by buyers and sellers. They were made by unelected government leaders. And these unelected government leaders sitting on committees and in meetings, they decided what, how, and for whom goods and services would be produced. So they decided the three economic questions. Government officials. In a communist society, the government itself, not individuals, they own what's called the means of production. The means of production are the things that you need to produce goods. So the government would own land, where you would build a factory, or you would build your restaurant or whatever. The government controlled the labor market. And the government owned access or controlled access to capital, which means capital is the money at the bank that you would go to the bank and try and get a loan or something to start a business. The government also controlled the channels for the distribution of goods and services. Government ownership of private property basically eliminates private competition, and innovation is kind of stifled in a communist society because individuals are not paid for an original idea. Everyone more or less earns the same money, and so why work harder than the next guy? It's not really going to be rewarding. Here's a slide of the main features of communism. You can pause here a minute and study them if you like. Communist countries. Beginning in 1989, the Soviet Union and several Eastern European countries abandoned communism. Today, China, North Korea, and Cuba remain communist countries. China, however, has recently taken some steps to create more of a free enterprise, competitive economy, but they still retain an authoritarian political system. So it's not a democracy, it's an authoritarian government, but they do have somewhat more of a free enterprise, competitive economy. Here's the third type of economic system, socialism. Definition. Socialism is an economic system where the most important businesses producing goods are owned by the government rather than by individuals. Socialism is a little bit different than communism, though, because there's still private ownership of small businesses and small manufacturing plants. The government may just own the largest industries, like the steel industry or a national airline, or control the phone company, things like that. Origins. The origins of socialism began in the 1800s, and it was a political movement. And again, kind of like Karl Marx, people looked around and they saw this injustices of industry where the rich got richer and the poor got poorer. Workers were basically exploited. This was going on in Europe. And socialism argued that the government should control the major means of production, not all the means of production, just the main ones. And then that way the government would be able to protect the rights of the worker. Services and goals. Socialist governments provide essential services to the public. So things like free education, low-cost housing, public transportation, and a national health program, health insurance. This way, the basic needs of people are kind of taken care of. Socialist economies, they attempt to distribute wealth evenly throughout the society, not equally, but a little bit more evenly. And high taxes are usually imposed on the wealthiest citizens. And the fourth type of economic system is mixed. It's kind of a combination of different systems. There's a spectrum of economic systems or governments in the world, and no economy totally follows any one type of economic system. There's no pure free enterprise or no pure communism. Most countries have a mixed economy that blends features of different economic systems. And so countries can be classified kind of along a continuum or a spectrum, ranging from free enterprise at one end to communism on the other end. Social relationships within economies. Social structure. Within each economic system, whether it's free enterprise or socialism, there's a social structure. People who share similar wealth and power and status or prestige, they belong to the same social class. Let's look at some of these social classes. First, at the top, you always have the upper class, and this is the group that either earns their wealth through working hard or they inherit it from their families. They own a large share of the property in the society. They have a luxurious lifestyle, and they often serve in various government or leadership roles. Beneath them is the middle class, and this is an intermediate group of educated and mostly successful people. These will be like your managers and professionals, teachers, tradespersons, small business owners. Next comes the working class, and this is a group of manual workers. These people work with their hands in factories, mining, transportation, or these could include also unskilled craftspersons. The next category of social class is the peasants, and these are farm workers or owners of small farms that are mainly engaged in just subsistence agriculture. These people have little education, and they have limited experience of the world outside their own village. And finally, at the bottom, even beneath the peasant, is the lower class. These people have really little to offer. They're uneducated, they're unskilled. They do the least desirable jobs, and they get paid very little. Types of economic activities. Economic development. Countries experience different levels of economic development. There are rich countries, countries in the middle, countries that are poor. The level of economic development, it's closely tied to the types of economic activities that the people in a country engage in. Advanced nations like the United States or European nations, they engage in complex and sophisticated economic activities. Let's look at the 4 types of economic activities now. First, primary economic activities. These activities involve the production of foods and the extraction of resources. This is your most basic type of economic activity. And so it includes growing crops, raising livestock, fishing, logging, just cutting down the trees, mining for resources under the ground. And only about 3% of the United States labor force is now engaged in these activities. In many countries, that percentage is much, much higher. Secondary economic activities. This is the second one. These activities, countries that engage in these activities, do manufacturing and they produce goods. They may make textiles, which is clothing, or design furniture. And these activities add value to raw materials by processing them in some way or by changing their form. So a primary economic activity can be logging. You just cut down the tree, or mining. You mine for gold. And then a secondary activity, you add value to that product. So you make furniture out of the tree, or you turn the gold into some kind of jewelry. You process it in some way. Tertiary economic activities. This is the third one. These activities, countries that engage in these activities, provide business or professional services. This is the service sector, and it includes occupations like teacher, nurse, doctor, accountant. In the United States, more than 80% of the labor force are tertiary workers. This is how they earn their living. They just provide a service. And the fourth type of economic activity is the quaternary economic activities. And these type of economic activities require a great deal of education. These are information processing jobs and management jobs, research services. These people are highly trained, and they go to years of university, have lots of education, and they work at research organizations. They may be a software engineer at Google, something like that. Only a very small percentage of the population is usually engaged in these activities. And in some countries, nobody is engaged in this type of activity. Natural resources. Natural and economic. Natural resources, those are the materials that are on or in the earth, things like the trees and fish and coal. And these things have economic value. But they don't have economic value until you apply technology to them and you transform these basic resources into something that people want, which is a good. And then it's for sale. Natural resources, they're abundant throughout the planet, but they're not distributed equally in each country. So some countries have more resources than others. When geographers study the economy of a country, they look very closely at the location, the quality, and the quantity of natural resources. Let's identify some of these resources. First are the renewable resources, and these resources can be replaced through natural processes, and they can be used over and over, and they're available without any human or outside influence. But you can overuse them, and you can make them extinct. And so these are resources like trees and seafood. You don't want to overfish the ocean. You won't have any seafood. But basically, these resources, they are renewable. You have then, second, is recyclable resources. A little bit like renewable resources, these resources can be used over and over. But you have to go through a process to prepare them for reuse. So you can recycle glass and aluminum, but it has to go through a process before you can reuse it. Third type of resource is the non-renewable resources. These resources, they cannot be replaced once they've been removed from the ground. They are finite. They can only be used once. Examples are gold, silver, iron. Also in this category, very importantly, are fossil fuels. Things like petroleum, natural gas, and coal. Fourth are the inexhaustible energy resources. And these resources are very important because they are, as we say, inexhaustible. They're used to produce power, and they're unlimited. Sunlight, solar energy, geothermal, wind power, the movement of the tides to produce energy, these are all inexhaustible. Sustainable development. Most countries, they seek sustainable development so that they can save scarce resources. They want to use resources in a way that can meet future and present human needs. Measures of economic development. levels of development. The most advanced economies, those countries are referred to as the more developed nations. And in those nations, workers are mostly engaged in tertiary and quaternary activities. These are the United States, Canada, Australia, several other countries, Japan. Countries with less advanced technologies, kind of at the bottom, these are the less developed nations. In these countries, workers engage in primary economic activities. And these countries may rely only upon one or two commodities for their earnings. Say you have a commodity that you're producing like petroleum, and your economy is relying solely on that for the wealth of the country. That can be pretty volatile, because if the price of oil drops, then you can become quite poor quite rapidly, and you have nothing to fall back on. In other words, you don't want to, as we say, put your eggs all in one basket. You want to have a diversified economy where you're not just producing oil, but you're producing lots of goods and providing lots of different services. Between the more developed and the less developed nations are economies called newly industrialized. These are like Brazil and India, China. And many workers in these countries are engaged in secondary economic activities. Economic indicators. These are the standards that economists use to make comparisons among economies. First is per capita income. This is the average amount of money earned by each person. Second, standard of living reflects a society's purchasing power, the health of the members of the society, and the level of education. The gross national product, GNP, this is the total value of all goods and services produced by a country. And fourth is the gross domestic product, or GDP. This is the value of all goods and services produced within the borders of a country. So there's a little bit of a difference between GNP and GDP. GNP includes if Apple Computer makes products in America, but they also make some in China, then that's GNP. GDP would just refer to that portion of profit that Apple is making from producing goods here in the United States. Democratic indicators. There seems to be no direct relationship between economic development and a nation's system of government. Some more developed countries, they've been ruled by authoritarian dictators. And some democracies, well, actually they're quite poor and less developed. Most advanced economies have now developed the free enterprise economic system along with the democratic government. However, as we mentioned earlier, the world's fastest growing economy, China, does not have a democratic government. Location of economic activities. Resources and consumers. There are a variety of geographic factors that influence where economic activities are located. These factors can include both the location of productive resources and where the consumers live. Here are the productive resources. First is natural resources. As we mentioned earlier, natural resources are the resources provided by nature that people, through manufacturing and through knowledge, turn into goods and services. This is air, water, plants, lumber, cotton, iron ore. The second productive resource is human resources. This is the labor that's required to produce something. The labor includes all the planning. It includes education and learning and training. And, as you sit there and study, you are becoming and adding value to yourself as a human resource. That's why you get paid more money down the road somewhere, because you have more value. The third type of productive resource is capital resources. And these are goods that are made not to consume by consumers, but they're used to make other goods and services. So these are the machines and tools at a factory. These also include infrastructure, technology, transportation routes, communication networks, the internet. These are all the foundation of an economy, and they are capital resources. And the fourth type of productive resource is entrepreneurship. And these are people who are extraordinarily skilled at bringing things together and organizing them, these productive resources, into something of value. They're often referred to as business owners or managers. Okay, so let's look a little bit more at natural resources. These are the materials from nature, the minerals and plant fibers, animal products, energy. These go into making a good. For the sake of cost and convenience, manufacturing is often located close to natural resources. If you own a steel mill and you need iron ore to make steel, you're going to locate that steel mill close to the where you're mining for the iron ore. Through manufacturing, natural resources, as we've mentioned, become economic resources. Climate. Climate affects the location of economic activities. It influences the type of crops that can be grown, and so is especially important in relationship to where agricultural activities are located. So you don't grow, sugar cane in Canada because it's too cold. You grow sugar cane in Brazil where it's warmer. Human resources. The location of economic activities also depends upon the availability of human resources and entrepreneurship. Infrastructure. The infrastructure of a society. This is important to determine where economic activities are located. Infrastructure, as we've mentioned, is a capital resource, and these are the investments that society makes in their roads, their power plants, their telephone lines, and their internet. Businesses take advantage of these resources that are provided to them by the government in order to help them be competitive and earn greater profits. Infrastructure also includes law and order, the police, money, banking, hospitals, healthcare, schools, universities. Those are all infrastructure. As I briefly mentioned, infrastructure reduces the company's cost of production, provide access to modern technology like the internet. Infrastructure like highways can reduce the amount of time that a company's workers spend on non-productive activities like driving to work. Access to consumers. The location of consumers influences where an economic activity is located. Some economic activities provide services to consumers. Schools, hospitals, professional services, retail stores, these are usually going to be located where consumers are found. More and more with, say, online shopping, where you might buy your clothes at a store online, the store doesn't have to be in the neighborhood. It can be anywhere. They just ship the thing to you through logistics. Geographic features like plains and valleys and rivers, these are likely places where productive resources and consumers come together. And changes in technology and the creation of new infrastructure, these may overcome geographic barriers to production and consumption. So you may want a factory that produces your iPhone right next to you in the same town because they can get you the iPhone right away. But if you have airplanes and container ships and modern logistics, then you can produce that phone more cheaply in China and have it shipped to you. So logistics kind of overcomes the limitations of geography, or technology does that. The end. Thank you for your attention.